Well, make you laugh when you're doing editing.
So tired.
You should yawn because I feel like
I'm sorry. It's been a long weekend.
I'm sorry. I get really like it's contagious to me.
You're hyper empathic. That's why. Welcome back to the Writing Inquisition. I'm Carol Benton.
I'm Marie Allen.
I'm Rose Lee.
And don't worry if you think you're hallucinating. They have actually swapped spaces, so it's fine. We're good. In any case. We're all kind of a little bit loopy right now, so
As per usual.
As per usual, but we're a little bit more on the edge of drunk tired.
Yeah.
So expect more tangents than usual. Unless I'm actually conscious when I'm editing this later. So this time we're going to be talking about character backstory and basically discussing what little tips we have, our own experiences, things we've heard from teachers, writers, all that good stuff. So the first question that I have written down, because when I did this yesterday, I sort of mushed questions together when I was taking notes, because
We've all been very busy.
Yeah, I was in a wedding 2 days ago, and I had work yesterday, which was a dumb idea.
That's awful.
Yeah. So, the first question that I have here is, what's so important about backstory?
So, for me, what's really important about a character's backstory is because it will dictate how they'll act in the present story and the choices that they'll make. And I think it ties into, if your character has a wound that they're struggling against throughout the whole story, backstory will help develop that, so you can figure out why they're acting a certain way. And, that was my only other thing. Also, I think backstory can dictate what characters your character will end up trusting, because maybe somebody betrayed them, or maybe they were abandoned. So, yeah, those were my notes.
Yeah,
I mean, essentially.
Literally, my entire bullet point for this is informs characters' experiences, reactions, personality, traumas, etc.
Yeah. Dictates how they're gonna be acting in the story, basically, and for future decisions and whatnot.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting to know people, and there's always that weird thing that you never quite understand, and then you finally hear the backstory behind it, and you're like, oh, that's okay, I get it now.
Yeah. It rounds out a character because the character had a life before the story began.
Unless they're born in the middle of the story. But...
Yeah, typically, the characters have had a life prior to story.
Yeah. And then, obviously, unless you're doing just, a collection of backstories, you don't really need to do all that much in the story itself. So, how much backstory should be revealed to the reader?
I think that depends. Depends on the character. Yeah. Well, it does.
Literally, my first word is depends. Depends.
It totally depends. It's the truth. Because you don't necessarily want to just do a backstory dump for every character in your story. You want to only tell the parts that will help your story along, help the character arcs along, just move the story forward. So really that's... But you don't want to just stop there necessarily. For yourself, the author, you should probably know everything. But you need to cherry pick and choose which pieces to actually put in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put the backstory should have new revelations of the character or the plot. So it's not just stuff that you kind of are like, well...
And in 5th grade, they won the spelling bee.
Yeah.
What the hell relevance does that have? Literally, I have, it depends, it'll vary by character, but you should trust your reader's intelligence to fill in certain blanks. Mm-hmm. And I think you really only should reveal as much as is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and timing and placing is everything.
It's critical.
Yeah.
Because, pulling from my own book, which is now out on paperback, there's a moment when Kylara has woken up on the Tiger Moth after the whole kidnapping issue and getting beaten half to death and all that stuff, when she and Marilla are talking, and it's like, are you okay?
I yawned. My eyes wanted to
And I was trying to hold in a laugh.
She saw me yawn. Okay, sorry.
Anyway, and either Kylara or Marilla, I honestly don't remember anymore, it's been a while since I've read that scene, brings up, like, you look like the time that we fell off the castle wall into the blackberry bushes. It's just a thing, it's a comparative thing for their memory, but it's not really a whole scene that needs to be there. So it's one of those things where it's like, just, that's a throwaway, but there are still certain backstory pieces that are a little bit critical. Like, there's stuff in book 1 that alludes to stuff that's gonna happen in book 2. It's like, oh shit, that's that thing, okay. This is explaining why she's still an only child, and yeah.
Yeah.
I have on here too, like, if you can imply the backstory, yay.
Yeah.
Because I think that can be really powerful, because, I don't know, it almost feels more like real life, because when you meet somebody, typically they don't go, let me just sit you down.
Like, here's my entire life story
about this, but you can kind of infer, like, oh, that's why and so does that, because I know these facts about them, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think implication in writing is so much fun.
Yeah.
I can't do it, but it's fun.
Yet. Can't do it
Yes.
yet. Yet.
I guess easy ways to basically bring up a piece of backstory if you're struggling to do that is if, like, one of the characters meets someone from their past in front of, the main character, for example. And then it's like, well, that story comes out because they hear things, and then they're like, well, now you should probably be filled in. That's probably the easiest way to do that.
Did it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually, and then other ways to do it is, like, if it's something about them, like, say if they have some sort of secret magic power or something that they didn't want to, like, share, or something weird about them that they didn't want to share, but the main character or some other character sees it happen.
See, I know you're probably thinking about your book, but it's also applying to my book.
It applies to a lot of books.
This is
applies to many books, not just fantasy either.
Very true.
So it's an easy tool, I guess, to sort of infer backstory and, like, bring it up.
Yeah.
Where it needs to be.
Yeah, and as Marie brought up a little earlier, the next question that I have listed is, how detailed should backstories be? And for the writer, you gotta know all of the major points of conflict, all the major events, all of that for each character. The reader doesn't necessarily need to know that immediately.
Or all of it ever.
Yeah, very true.
They only need to know certain portions of it.
Yeah, little kernel.
Yeah. And whatever you tell them is what they're going to know for sure.
Yes, and then you can go on Pinterest and Tumblr later and see what they've come up with as fan theory.
Exactly.
Eventually.
I had basically the same.
Yeah.
I had the moments thing I brought up. I feel like that fits further down. Yeah, big moments, I would say, where I think it's more fun when a character has to make a really hard moral choice with high stakes. That's always really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get obsessed with giving detailed backstories, and then I never work on the main story. So don't do that.
I mean, get it figured out, but actually work on the thing you're trying to work on.
Yes. Yes.
And then, as far as functions of a backstory, like, other than what's so important about it, I have listed it's good for character insight, it's good for secrets that only certain other characters know about. It can also help to set up foreshadowing. We will eventually be talking about foreshadowing, we just don't know if it's going to happen today or not, because we're all...
Yeah, we need to do a little bit more on that before we actually film that video.
And I also have it can set up the history of the world you're creating. Like, with Tarek having seen so many battles before he hits 25.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of an important detail to know.
Yeah. Or like in the case of my story, for example, where like things go back thousands and thousands of years, you know, I kind of need to know the beginning of everything, you know, and why my story takes place the way it does, and goes back really far. So, there's certain events and stuff, so world backstory is super important too, if that applies to your book.
That's what I had on my list. Like, it's impact on world, characters' actions, choices. Not just the main character, all characters that have the world. I have to do all my history for
all
the
key
world.
players in the main events of the history of the world.
Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't help that all of our histories are intertwined.
Yeah.
So
we really have to get it straight.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last thing that we have planned to talk about, and we'll see again how many tangents we go off on, because it's us, is a few ways to go about coming up with backstory and developing it. Now, one thing that we've all done for sure is group brainstorming, particularly with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the whole three-way canonized crossover thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah. And even before that even happened, we were just sort of bouncing ideas off of one another, because it's really great to have someone else who at least reads a lot of the same books that you write, or the same kind of genre. I mean, I'm trying to be a little.
I mean, having a lot of readers is great too. But
yes, but I mean, like, if you're just starting out and you know you need to talk to someone who kind of understands what you're trying to get at, basically. So either another writer who also writes fantasy, or another writer in general that you trust, or someone who reads a lot of the same genre that you write. So that will help a lot, because it'll get the gears running and in place. It'll get your creative juices going. And also, one big tip that I read or heard somewhere, and I think is completely true, is like the first couple of like rites of backstory and stuff, like basically that'll be just like the cliches that come out, the stuff that, you know, everyone knows is coming, kind of a thing, and then like the third or fourth one, it'll start to actually develop original ideas, something like that.
That sounds really familiar.
Yeah.
I heard the same
Yeah.
thing and
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
remember.
and you could do that. You could apply that to scenes. You could apply that to any kind of point in your writing. But for backstories, that also helps, because backstories need twists as well.
yeah.
Twists and turns and unexpected portions. It's basically a story just for you, as the writer, and just to know this person's backstory.
Yeah.
How this person came to be who they are today.
Yeah.
I almost my thing is like a mosh posh, but I think it'd be kind of cool to almost work backwards. Like if you go, okay, here's my plot, I know these big events that happened in the world, and then you can kind of see like, well, if X, Y, and Z is happening, how is my character affected by that? And that way it feels more organic than, you know, the cliche, like, and then he defeated the bully, but then the bully burned his house down, you know, whatever.
Extreme.
So
I'm just flashing back to when we hung out in July, and we're coming up with like Talitha's evil overlord list.
Oh. I must kill more people.
Yes.
And I also learned from a writing teacher something, he like listed like 6, but I can only remember like a couple. But if you think of your character's greatest moment of shame, of triumph, of joy, of fear, and make it like a big moment, not just like, I shoplifted, you know, something really big, like killed somebody, because I always go to murder. Well, it's really big, it's a good example. Yeah.
I know, it's just so funny how you have this like petite, cute little thing going like, murder!
So today in class, we're going to talk about murder.
That would be my dream class.
Okay, I think I actually found a book on Amazon I should send you the link for.
Okay. So, those are my twos in murder, basically. Just kill everybody and then they'll have a great backstory. No, don't do that. Is that really all I had notes on? Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
Because everything I wrote here is what I said in a different way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, fortunately, I'm a hyper planner and over prepared, so I have a few other options to work with. So one of them that I realized I haven't actually tried yet is mind mapping, which is a sort of brainstorming theory that a lot of us learned in like elementary school.
Yes.
Where you have like the character's name in the middle and then like the web of little bubbles that go out.
That.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that had a term.
I don't remember if this is the actual term or not.
Well, we're using it.
Yep.
You have coined a term.
I have coined a few terms, not all of them good.
That would make sense, though.
Yes. One that I've started working on, but I have mostly given up on because I haven't actually worked on it in like a year and a half, is writing personalized timelines for each of the characters. I can probably post like a screenshot or something along those lines.
Oh, your face!
Yeah, pretty much. And then maybe doing a slightly modified like Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, like rolling for stats and all that stuff to sort of come up with the character. But you're always going to have to do very personalized details for certain things, like with Tarek and how his powers came into being used, and Brander and why he's a regicidal psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Talitha.
Yeah.
And all that sort of thing that you really can only come up with for the purposes directly related to the story that you're working on. You can also draw from personal experience and apply it to certain characters, but...
Wasn't that a question?
From like 1 or 2 podcasts ago, and probably another one coming up.
God, there was something like
Everything
that
ties
was,
in somewhere.
Yes.
I swear there's something in here that's like personal experience, and never mind, I imagined
Page
it.
2? There's more than one page.
Well, yes, but I probably imagined it. That was weird. I feel like the word, like I'm in the
It was probably
Matrix.
under like other references you can use for an upcoming podcast.
I swear in here, I'm gonna be so mad when I find it at 2:45 a.m. this morning. Be like, that's where it was.
Yeah, but like, I know with Shikaba in calm down. She's really mad at me for what happens to him in book 2. Even though it's not specifically written what happens to him, calm your shit.
Okay.
When I first introduced him in book 1, I mentioned a limp. And a little bit later go into like, it came from some asshole stabbed him in the knee. I have bad cartilage in this knee. I really know what it's like to feel like I have like a nail lodged in my joint. So that's where that came from. And all of that sort of thing, and yeah.
Yeah, and if you have excess backstory stuff, there's a lot of fun things you can do with them. There's been authors who have created short stories, like a book of short stories that come from all the backstory stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that you could do. You could also do like your own fan theories of your own books and stuff and put it out there.
That's
So-
like my life.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, I
Fan
mean,
theories
there's
for
so
my own
much fun stuff, so if you end up writing a whole ton of it, don't worry too much about it.
Yeah, like you guys know by now that we have a canonized crossover series planned, but we also want to do a little bit of like a prep for it and do like a set of crossover short stories to sort of go like, here's how everything actually ties together.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great though. But that's gonna go into a lot of different backstories and how they actually overlap and how all 3 of our worlds actually connect to each other. Legitimately, it's legitimate.
Yes. We've thought long and hard about this.
And we are still thinking long and hard about this.
Yes.
But ultimately it's gonna come down to what we actually managed to get the fuck done.
Yeah.
Because as you can tell, we get giggly with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But we have already established that Rose and I are going to be writing any death or pain scenes because you just can't handle it.
No. No. I mean, it depends. I mean, some days I might be able to, like, add into it, but most days I'll just be like, I'll be over here crying.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, Rose and I will be like, let's see. We've already killed his parents. We've already killed his friends. He's already been forced to kill somebody that he liked. What else can we do?
My favorite
Let's stab him.
is having people kill people that they like. It's my favorite.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
good pain right there. Not that you should do that, but
Not in real life.
Not
That's
in
why we
real
have
life.
fiction.
No, yeah.
But I think that'll about do it for this episode of the Writing Inquisition. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carol Benton.
I'm Marie Allen.
I'm Emma Rosalie.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.